They say betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people you'd give your last breath for. For me, it wasn't just a saying. It was the truth I learned on the night of my brother's wedding, standing in a ballroom filled with laughter, champagne, and promises of forever. The music was soft, the chandeliers bright. Everyone looked like a scene out of a magazine, dresses sparkling, suits crisp, the air thick with perfume and secrets. I should have been happy. My little brother was marrying the girl of his dreams, and I had the love of my life standing by my side, or at least I thought I did. Her name was Amber, the kind of woman who walked into a room and made people pause. I had given her everything: jewelry that cost me more than a year's salary, a car she picked out without glancing at the price tag, loyalty that ran deeper than blood. In my head, I believed love worked like math. The more you gave, the more you got back. But math doesn't work in matters of the heart. I remember holding my glass of whiskey, leaning against a corner pillar, just taking it all in. The bride's dress shimmered under the lights. My brother looked happier than I had ever seen him. And then my eyes drifted across the crowded dance floor, past the smiling faces, past the toasts and cameras, until they landed on her. Amber, not in my arms, not even near me. She was standing across the room, laughing. Not just a polite chuckle. No, this was the kind of laugh that reached her eyes, the kind that once belonged only to me. And the man standing next to her, his hand wasn't just close, it was on her waist, holding her like she was his. The room went silent in my head. All the music, the laughter, the clinking glasses, it turned into static. I wanted to storm across the floor, drag her away, demand answers, but something inside me froze. Because when betrayal is standing right in front of you, sometimes your body knows before your brain catches up. My hands shook, my throat tightened, and for the first time in years, I felt powerless. I stepped back into the shadows, letting the crowd swallow me. I watched her lean closer, whisper something into his ear. He laughed, and she touched his shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world. That was the moment my heart cracked. Not shattered completely, not yet, but it cracked enough that I knew things would never be the same. And that's where my story begins. Before I continue, let me pause for just a second. If you're new here, I want you to subscribe to my channel, Quantro, because what you're about to hear is not just a story. It's a journey of betrayal, revenge, and the cost of loving the wrong person. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Now back to the night that changed my life. I told myself maybe I was overthinking. Maybe it was nothing. Weddings make people happy, loosen boundaries. Alcohol makes hands wander where they shouldn't. I tried to convince myself of all that. But the truth? I already knew. Amber wasn't mine. Not in the way I believed. When the first dance ended and the floor filled with guests, I saw them slip out the side door. My chest tightened. My feet moved before my mind even decided. I followed. Through the hallway, past the restrooms, out toward the garden. The cool night air hit me as the music faded behind. And there they were. Her hand still on his chest, his voice low, her smile brighter than I'd seen in months. My brother's wedding wasn't supposed to be my funeral, but standing there in the shadows, that's exactly how it felt. I clenched my fists. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to step out, to catch them in the act, to demand the truth. But I didn't. Not yet. I stood there and let the pain burn into my memory. Because sometimes the deepest cuts aren't made by knives, they're made by silence. And as I turned back toward the ballroom, forcing myself to plaster on a smile, I made a silent promise. If Amber wanted to play with my loyalty, if she thought I would break quietly, she was wrong. The night wasn't over, but neither was I. The wedding reception carried on like nothing had happened, but inside me, something had died. I walked back into the ballroom with a smile so practiced it almost convinced even me. People slapped my back, poured me drinks, pulled me into conversations, and yet the only thing I could see in my mind was Amber's hand resting on another man's chest. I laughed at jokes I didn't hear, nodded at stories I didn't follow, and clinked glasses I didn't taste. My body was in the room, but my soul was still out in that garden, replaying every second in slow motion. Amber reappeared 20 minutes later. Her lipstick was untouched, her dress flawless, her hair still pinned perfectly in place. She moved through the crowd with the same elegance that had once stolen my heart, but now every step she took felt like a dagger pressed against my ribs. When her eyes met mine, she smiled as though nothing was wrong, as though she hadn't just given pieces of herself away to another man. She slipped her hand around my arm and leaned in close, whispering, "Isn't this wedding beautiful?" Her voice was soft, warm, and poisonous. I didn't answer. My throat refused to form words. Instead, I simply nodded, staring into her eyes, trying to see if guilt was hiding there. But guilt wasn't there. Only comfort, only confidence. That was when I realized the truth. She wasn't afraid of getting caught. She believed I would never confront her, and why wouldn't she? I had given her everything: cars, jewelry, money, loyalty. She believed my love had turned me into a blind man, one who would never dare to open his eyes. That night, after the speeches were over and the cake had been cut, my brother and his new bride danced under the stars while guests circled them, cheering. I stood on the edge of the dance floor, clapping, smiling, pretending, but inside, a storm was building. My brother didn't deserve for his night to be stained by my heartbreak, so I swallowed it. I told myself I'd wait, not tonight, but soon. Amber tugged me toward the floor, begging me to dance. Her laughter rang out as though nothing in the world was wrong. She twirled in my arms, and for anyone watching, we must have looked like the perfect couple. But for me, it was like holding a stranger. Every time she smiled, I saw his shadow in the corner of her lips. Every time she touched me, I wondered if she touched him the same way. And every time I looked into her eyes, I saw the reflection of a man I was no longer sure existed, the loyal fool who thought love was enough. When the night finally ended, when the lights dimmed and the guests spilled out into waiting cars, I drove Amber home. She rested her head on my shoulder, humming softly to the radio, as though she hadn't shattered me hours earlier. Her perfume filled the car, sweet and suffocating. At red lights, I looked at her hands resting in her lap, delicate and beautiful, and I wondered how many lies they had held that I had chosen not to see. When we pulled into the driveway, she leaned over and kissed me. Her lips were soft, her breath warm, and for a fleeting moment, I almost convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, I had imagined it all. That maybe I was drunk, paranoid, jealous for no reason. But then she whispered, "I'm so glad we have each other." And the words felt like poison dripping into my ear, because I knew what I had seen. And no lie could erase it. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship. The times she came home late, the phone calls she silenced when I walked into the room, the sudden need for space on weekends when I had always been her first choice. Like puzzle pieces, they all began to fit together. My love had blinded me, but now the picture was clear. The next morning, I left before she woke up. I told her I had errands to run, but the truth was, I needed air. I needed to breathe without her scent clinging to me, without her lies pressing against my chest. I drove aimlessly, city to suburb, suburb to highway, until I found myself parked at a diner off the interstate. I sat in that booth for hours, nursing black coffee and staring at my reflection in the window. The man staring back wasn't the same man who had walked into that wedding. He was colder now, sharper, and then something unexpected happened. As I sat there, my phone buzzed. A message from a number I didn't recognize. The words were simple. "You deserve to know the truth. She's been seen with him before. If you want proof, meet me tomorrow at 7. Same diner, back booth." My hands trembled as I read it. Who was this? How did they know? Part of me wanted to delete it, pretend it was a prank, forget the whole thing. But another part, the part of me that had been awake all night, knew this was it. This was the thread I needed to pull. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I went home, watched Amber move around the house with ease, humming while she cooked, smiling while she asked me about my day. I answered with one-word lies. Fine, good, nothing. All while my phone burned in my pocket with the weight of that message. That night, when she climbed into bed, curling up against me, I let her. I let her because I needed her to believe I was still blind. I needed her to think her mask was still in place, because tomorrow, at 7, I would start tearing it off. As the hours ticked by, I stared into the darkness and whispered to myself, "You thought I'd never see, Amber, but I do now, and you're not ready for what happens next." The storm inside me had found its direction. The waiting was over. The next evening, I arrived at the diner 30 minutes early. I didn't want to be late, didn't want to miss whatever truth was about to be handed to me. The sun was setting low over the interstate, bleeding orange and purple into the horizon, and the neon "open" sign flickered faintly against the glass. I slid into the back booth, the same one I had occupied the day before, and ordered another black coffee. My hands were steady, but my chest thudded with each tick of the clock on the wall. I didn't know who I was waiting for, or if this was a trap, or if maybe I was just a fool chasing ghosts, but what I did know was this: ignorance was no longer an option. At exactly 7, the door opened. A man walked in, tall, maybe mid-40s, with sharp eyes that looked like they had seen too much and lips pressed into a line too thin to trust. He scanned the room, spotted me, and without hesitation walked straight to my booth. He didn't ask if he could sit. He just slid in across from me, dropped a folded envelope onto the table, and leaned back. "You don't know me," he said, his voice low, steady, practiced. "But I know her." The diner noise seemed to vanish. The clink of dishes, the hiss of the grill, the murmur of conversations, all of it blurred into silence. I stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. My mouth went dry. "Who are you?" I asked. "Doesn't matter who I am," he replied. "What matters is who she really is, and you need to see it for yourself." He pushed the envelope closer. My fingers hovered over it for a moment before I finally pulled it open. Inside were photographs, grainy at first glance but clear enough. Amber at a bar. Amber in the passenger seat of a car that wasn't mine. Amber with the same man I had seen her with at my brother's wedding, his hand on her knee, her smile wide, carefree, like the world belonged to them. Each photo was a punch to the gut. My chest tightened until I couldn't breathe. I wanted to throw them across the diner, wanted to burn them, wanted to erase them from existence, but I couldn't stop looking, because deep down, I had been waiting for proof, and now it was staring back at me. The man watched me carefully carefully, as though measuring how much of the truth I could take. "She's been seeing him for months," he said. "I don't know what she tells you, but it isn't the truth. He's not just some fling. She's been serious about him." I swallowed hard, my throat raw. "Who is he?" The man's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Her boss, the one who signs her checks, the one she stays late with, the one she tells you she hates." A cold wave rolled through me. I had heard his name before. Amber had complained about him endlessly, how arrogant he was, how demanding, how he made her work late without overtime. I used to comfort her, tell her she was strong, that she could handle it, that I was proud of her. And all the while, the man she claimed to despise was the one she was running to when she wasn't with me. The stranger leaned in, his voice dropping even lower. "I shouldn't even be here, but I don't like seeing good men played for fools. I've seen it happen too many times. And when I saw you at the wedding, the way she looked at him while standing right next to you, I knew you deserved the truth." I sat there in silence, my hands trembling as I gathered the photos back into the envelope. Every part of me wanted to deny it, wanted to scream that this man was lying, that the pictures were fake, but I couldn't, because I knew in my bones it was true. I had seen enough with my own eyes to know this wasn't a setup. Finally, I asked, "Why are you telling me this? What do you get out of it?" The man's expression hardened. "Let's just say I've got my own reasons for wanting him to suffer, and if you play this right, you can make both of them pay." With that, he stood. He didn't shake my hand, didn't give me his name, didn't ask for thanks. He just walked out of the diner and left me sitting there with an envelope full of betrayal burning in my hands. For a long time, I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at the window, watching headlights flash by on the highway. I thought about the years I had given Amber, the sacrifices, the loyalty, the blind trust. And for what? For her to laugh in another man's arms. For her to wear my jewelry while giving her smile to someone else. For her to drive the car I bought while riding in his. When I finally drove home, the envelope sat heavy in the passenger seat. Amber was in the kitchen when I walked in, humming while she cooked, just like always. She turned and smiled at me, her eyes lighting up as though she hadn't destroyed me. "You're home early," she said. I forced a smile. "Yeah, thought I'd surprise you." She kissed me on the cheek, her lips brushing the same skin that still burned with betrayal. I hugged her, held her close, and in that moment, a plan began to form. I wouldn't confront her tonight, not yet. If she thought I was blind, I would let her keep believing it. If she thought I was weak, I would let her keep thinking that too. Because the sweetest revenge doesn't come from rage, it comes from patience. Over the next week, I watched her carefully. Every late-night phone call, every sudden errand, every excuse, I logged it all in my mind. And each time she lied, I smiled back at her, pretending I believed. She was digging her own grave, and I was handing her the shovel. But the thing about betrayal is, once it cracks your heart, it also sharpens your eyes. I started seeing everything I had ignored before. The way she angled her phone away from me. The way her smile faded whenever I asked about work. The way she grew restless when I got too close. She thought she was clever. She thought I was blind. But I was awake now, wide awake. And as I lay in bed one night, staring at the ceiling while she slept beside me, her hand resting carelessly on my chest, I whispered to myself, "You think you've won, Amber, but you have no idea what's coming. You have no idea who I become when I've been betrayed." The storm inside me had grown darker, stronger, unstoppable, and soon it would break. The days that followed were a performance, and I played my role with the precision of an actor who knew the audience was watching closely. Amber believed she was the star of her own secret romance, but what she didn't know was that the stage was mine, and I was quietly rewriting the script while she spoke her lines, oblivious to the fact that I had stopped being her blind lover and had become her silent executioner. I woke up each morning with a smile, kissed her cheek, asked her about her day, listened to her stories about late hours at the office, about demanding deadlines and unreasonable bosses, and I nodded like the supportive partner she thought I still was, all while the photographs burned in my pocket, all while the truth clung to my skin like a second shadow. The stranger's words replayed in my mind, "If you play this right, you can make both of them pay." And those words became my compass, my strategy, my promise to myself that I wouldn't simply expose her, I would dismantle her, strip away everything she thought she had secured by betraying me, and make her regret every laugh she shared in another man's arms. The first step was patience, the second was control, and the third was timing, because revenge isn't rushed, it's brewed, it's crafted, it's savored like whiskey that burns just enough to remind you it's real. So I began to study her, not as the woman I once loved, but as a subject, a puzzle I needed to solve. And every movement she made, every glance at her phone, every excuse for being late became another piece falling neatly into place. She thought she was clever when she tucked her phone under the pillow at night, but I was awake, eyes open in the dark, memorizing the rhythm of her notifications, the way her breath quickened when she read certain messages, the way she bit her lip when she replied. She thought she was sneaky when she took longer showers in the morning, but I noticed the faint perfume that wasn't hers lingering on her skin. She thought she was untouchable when she told me she'd be working late, but I followed her once, driving 3 cars back, watching as she pulled into a hotel parking lot instead of her office, watched as he met her at the door with a hand pressed to the small of her back like she was already his. I didn't confront her, not yet, because confrontation would give her a way out, and I wanted her trapped, suffocating under the weight of her own lies until there was nowhere left to run. Instead, I began building my my arsenal quietly, carefully, gathering receipts, taking photos, recording conversations when she thought I wasn't listening. I became a ghost in my own house, silent, but everywhere, seeing everything she thought was hidden. But revenge isn't just about punishment, it's about precision, and I knew I couldn't act without knowing the full picture, so I researched him too, her so-called boss, digging into his life, his reputation, his weaknesses, and what I found only fueled my fire. He was married, with 2 kids, a polished image in the community, the kind of man who loved being seen as respectable, the kind of man who built his world on the illusion of integrity, and if there's one thing men like him fear, it's exposure. Suddenly, I saw it, clear as glass. Amber wasn't just betraying me, she was aligning herself with a man who had everything to lose if the truth ever saw daylight, and that was where my power lay. I could destroy them both with one strike if I wanted, but I wasn't ready, not yet, because if I was going to burn their house of lies, I wanted to be the one holding the match while they stood inside watching it collapse. So each day I smiled wider, cooked her favorite meals, bought her flowers on a Tuesday just to see her confusion, gave her the illusion of safety, the comfort of believing she had gotten away with everything, and in her arrogance, she grew careless, laughing too loudly at texts she pretended were from her coworkers, slipping out of bed to take calls in the hallway, leaving behind fragments of conversations that told me more than she realized. But the sweetest moment came one evening when she was in the shower, her phone buzzing on the nightstand, the screen lighting up with his name. "Can't stop thinking about you. Last night was perfect. Next time, I want more." I stared at those words, my blood boiling, my hands trembling not with heartbreak anymore, but with hunger. Hunger for the moment I would make them choke on their own passion, when their stolen love would turn into their downfall. I didn't reply. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't leave a trace. I just locked that message into my memory like another bullet in the chamber I was building. That night, lying beside her, listening to her breathing as she slept, I felt something shift inside me, a clarity sharper than any blade. Love was gone, and what replaced it was purpose, pure and unwavering. And I knew that when the time came, I wouldn't hesitate. The masks we wear always fall eventually, and Amber's mask was already cracking. She just didn't know the man she thought was blind was already holding the pieces, waiting to crush them in his fist. And as I closed my eyes, forcing myself into sleep, one thought replayed in my mind, steady and relentless. They think I'm the fool, but when the curtain falls, they'll realize I was the author of their ending all along. I waited until everything I had built was perfect. Timing, evidence, audience. Because there is an art to ending a story, and I intended to write theirs with the care of a man who had watched his life unravel stitch by stitch. The week I chose to act was ordinary on the surface. Monday meetings, grocery runs, Amber humming in the kitchen like nothing was wrong, her laugh still bright when she spoke to me. But underneath the normalcy, my plan was moving like a quiet machine, gears meshing and ready to turn. First, I made sure the man she loved, the polished, married boss who hid his dirty hands behind a respectable face, had nowhere to hide. I emailed anonymous tips to the right inboxes. HR at his company, the editor of the local paper that loved scandals involving prominent men, and a small but relentless investigative blog that adored exposing hypocrisy. I attached copies of the photographs, the hotel receipts with timestamps, the GPS data from nights she claimed to be at the office, and the audio clips I'd recorded when she whispered his name in our sleep, each file labeled plainly like the truth I was delivering. Evidence.zip, and I watched with a calm that surprised me as the first reply pinged my phone, a terse HR memo promising an internal review, the journalist's curt, "We'll look into this," and the blogger's immediate hunger for more. While the external world began turning toward them, I worked closer to home. I printed copies of the photos and left them in places designed to be found, an unassuming envelope on his secretary's desk, with the caption, "See what your boss is hiding," a set slipped onto the concierge's counter at the country club where he volunteered, and a neatly arranged packet mailed to his wife with no return address, the contents deliberate and crystalline. Dates, locations, names, a betrayal laid out like an accusation framed under glass. Seeing that woman open the envelope, weeks later, through an account I had arranged with a private investigator's discreet updates, felt like the first strike on a brittle wall. She read, then reread. Her face went pale, then furious, then hollow, and in that silent transformation I watched the man I'd been hunting start to unravel. Simultaneously, I fed the media little pieces. An anonymous tip turned into a background story that cited HR concerns and 2 unnamed sources, and then a splash, a weekend feature on the blogger's site with screen grabs and a headline that burned, "Respected executive accused of affair. Wife seeks answers." The clicks multiplied. Strangers seethed in the comments. A conservative online forum speculated about morality, and within 48 hours his name had become a public weight he could no longer carry quietly. Amber thought she was untouchable because she had cloaked herself in my gifts, in the life we'd built together. But I had learned that the things people display the loudest are also the things that stain the deepest. when the truth drains out. Her friends called. Are the rumors true? Her mother left awkward voicemails that became accusatory instead of consoling. Someone from the office called her into a meeting that was leaking with whispers. She panicked in tiny, defeated ways, crying in the bathroom, throwing clothes in a suitcase, pleading with me only once in a voice I hardly recognized. Please, not like this. I didn't mean for him to, and that single plea was a shriek against the glass of everything she had broken. But I didn't gloat when she collapsed in the doorway, because revenge had never been about the satisfying sight of someone falling. It was about the reclamation of my dignity, the undoing of a man who thought that power allowed him to pick and discard people like trophies, and the exposure of a woman who had traded honesty for comfort. The legal wheels turned too. HR suspended him pending an investigation. The country club asked him to step down from volunteer duties, and the blog I'd fed found a source willing to go on the record about a pattern of behavior. His wife filed for separation, the court papers becoming another public thing I watched unfurl like a dark flag. Amber tried to explain herself to me in the quiet after one particularly brutal article, wrapping her hands around mine as if touch could stitch what words had torn. But my hands were cold, and my voice had been softened into something I barely recognized. Measured. Final. You did this, I said, not in accusation but in statement. You chose him. You chose to hide. You chose to laugh with him. I only chose to show the truth. She begged, sobbed, promised anything. Therapy, apologies, to leave him, and for a moment I saw the girl I had loved, but I also saw the woman who had been laughing in another man's arms on my brother's wedding night, and that image could not be erased by anyone's tears. In the weeks that followed, their world collapsed precisely because it had been built on secrecy. His career stalled under the scrutiny of shareholders who suddenly cared about image and ethics. His home filled with lawyers, and Amber's friendships fractured when people chose sides or simply recoiled from drama. The town that once toasted their name now whispered it when our paths crossed, and the things I had given her, her jewelry, the car with expensive leather seats, the dresses that used to catch my breath, became not tokens of our love, but relics of a chapter I wanted closed. Yet as the public spectacle ate at their private lives, I discovered something unexpected. Revenge did not fill the hollow wound betrayal left. It rearranged it, made room for something else. Clarity. A cold peace that hummed under my skin and steadied me when loneliness knocked. I had set the stage for their disgrace, but I also had to clean the pieces from my own floor, and so I began to live in honest light again, returning the expensive things I could not bear to keep, donating what felt like tainted gifts, meeting friends for coffee and not hiding the hollow where my heart had been, rebuilding trust with myself instead of with anyone else. Months later, the dust settled into a new pattern. The man lost his position and retreated into a quieter life, his name mentioned less and less in the paper. Amber moved out, first to a friend's spare room, and then to an apartment across town where I saw her sometimes in passing. Eyes lowered, hair shorter, laugh quieter. People said she deserved what she got, and maybe in some cold ledger she did, but the ledger didn't record the nights I spent awake replaying our years, the slow ache of memories that were mine and now belonged to no one. Still, on a winter morning when the city was bare and honest and the air sharp, I walked through a park alone and felt a thin thread of relief loosen inside me. No triumph shouted from rooftops, no parades, just the small, undeniable fact that I had taken back the narrative of my life and refused to let it be written by someone else's lies. Revenge had been the instrument I used to cut the cords, but it was not the destination. The destination was being free enough to see clearly, to protect myself from the seductive comfort of blindness, and to move forward with hands that knew how to give without losing themselves. As for Amber, and for him, their ending was public and messy and irrevocable, a cautionary tale told in whispers at dinner tables, and perhaps that was justice enough. I closed that chapter not with glee, but with the weary calm of a man who had been betrayed and had, by force and will, chosen to stand again. Scarred, yes, but awake. And in the quiet that followed their fall, I learned that surviving is, at its core, an act of authorship. You may be handed a bad page, but you can always turn it and begin to write the next.